Sometimes the biggest turning points in life don't feel like turning points at all. They start with an ordinary conversation or one decision that quietly changes everything. After 16 months of paying off our IRS debt, we can finally breathe again. We still weren't financially independent. We still had a long way to go. But for the first time, we stopped thinking about surviving and started thinking about building. Looking back now, this was the moment our future really began. Episode 3: The Two Decisions That Changed Our Future. At the end of episode 2, I told you that after 16 long months, we finally made our last payment to the IRS. It felt like we could finally breathe again. And for the first time in a long time, I remember it felt like we finally had a little hope. But here's what's interesting: getting out of debt didn't suddenly change our lives. We still weren't financially independent. We still weren't wealthy. We still had businesses to build. And we still had a vision for the kind of life that we wanted. What happened next is what really started changing our future. Without even realizing it, Edita and I both made career decisions that would eventually impact everything that came after. We got to remember that back at that time, Adita was working for a mental health agency. She loved helping people. She's always loved helping people. That had never really changed. But like so many people in healthcare, she was working incredibly hard without the compensation or without being compensated in a way that truly reflected the value she was bringing to the table or providing. So I remember she began to ask herself questions like, what if I build something on my own? She began wondering what's going to happen, leaving the security of a steady paycheck isn't easy. So what's going to happen to us? You got to remember, especially at that time when we had just gone through a financially difficult season, most people probably would have waited. Most people probably would have played it safe. But sometimes the safest decisions long term isn't staying comfortable. It's betting on yourself. And I am so proud to say and let share with everyone that she made the decision to bet on herself. And in 2018, Adita started her own private practice. At the exact same time, something was happening with our pest control company too. The business was finally beginning to stabilize again, and for the first time, I was able to hire our first few employees. Now, that might not sound like a huge milestone to most people, but for me, it was. It was incredibly huge. Up until then, I was the business. If I didn't work, the truth is, nothing really happened. So, hiring those first few employees gave me something I hadn't experienced before. It gave me time. It allowed me to slowly shift from working almost entirely in the business to beginning the transition towards working on the business. That's something we hear a lot as entrepreneurs. You need to work on the business, not in the business. That was probably the first time I was able to do that. And I didn't realize it then, but that small shift would eventually change everything for me and how I looked at business too. When I look back now, this was probably the first time that I actually started to believe that freedom might actually be possible, and not because we had money, because the truth is, we really didn't. And not because life suddenly became easier, because it really didn't. It actually became harder for us. It was because we were beginning to build systems instead of surviving. And for the first time, our effort wasn't just producing income, it was beginning to create momentum. And that was huge. Now, I don't want to sit here and try to paint this picture that everything suddenly became perfect because, well, it's life and nothing is perfect. Life was still busy. We were raising our family. We were learning how to blend our careers with our family life, the old work life balance, right? We were still trying to build businesses. We were trying to be present. We were trying to make good financial decisions. And some days we felt like we were making just a little progress. And other days we felt like we were taking 2 to 10 steps backwards. But we kept moving. One of the biggest lessons from this season of our lives was realizing that success usually isn't one giant breakthrough. It's hundreds of ordinary decisions made consistently. One client, one employee, one decision, one sacrifice, one conversation, and one improvement. Over time, those little decisions begin to compound, kind of like investing. You don't always notice the growth right away, but eventually you look back and you realize just how far you've come. While all of this was happening, something else happened that changed our family forever. In 2018, I boarded an airplane for Europe for the very first time. I had never been before. We were traveling to Slovakia so that we could meet more of Edita's family and experience the place she called home. At that time, I had no idea how much travel would eventually become part of our family story. If there's one thing I hope people take away from today's episode, it's this: don't underestimate small beginnings. Every business starts with one customer, every investment starts with $1, every journey starts with one step. Looking back, the things that changed our lives didn't feel extraordinary in the moment. They were simply the next right decision. Thank you so much for watching our sweet success. If you're enjoying our story, I would love for you to subscribe and continue the journey with us. I would love to hear from you as well. Have you ever taken a risk that completely changed your life? Let me know in the comments. Until next time, I'll see you in episode 4.